How can anyone, whether they want to work in a language school or privately from their own laptop anywhere in the world, create a rewarding and impactful career teaching English as a second language, even if they are just starting out or have no teaching experience or ability? Hi, my name is Lynette Kim, and here on the TESOL Talk podcast, I aim to answer that very question.
If you find yourself in a situation where you need to create resources that you teach in an ESL classroom, don't despair. There are plenty of things that you can do. Now, if you have the internet, then you can get lots of pictures online to put into worksheets, because that's basically what you're going to be doing, is making worksheets and flashcards, whether you're teaching low-level children or adults, or if it's higher level, then you're going to be looking for texts online from online magazines, websites of special interest, and so forth. So there's heaps out there. And, you can use these because as long as you're not selling it, you can use the images, you can print them out and use them for teaching, just not for creating books and selling. Now, if you have to do this by hand, just say there's no internet, you're working somewhere, maybe you're volunteering and you're in a country and there just isn't internet access, you don't have computers, all you've got is pen, paper, scissors, your regular craft things, you can still come up with really good things for teaching. Now, it's easy to do flashcards. You don't have to be a perfect artist. The more, crazy looking, you have dogs, cats, whatever animals you're teaching, just draw them out. You can use stick figures, all this sort of thing for teaching very low level and teaching children. Now, if you're teaching adult, use your memory. I mean, you've read lots of things, you know lots of things, facts, text, if you've got any books that you can use, excerpts from things for reading tasks and using a bit of text from a book and just putting it down as on a worksheet, and then having vocabulary being the one of the skills in the lesson that you're drawing out vocabulary and discussing it. Creating worksheets doesn't have to be daunting, even if you have nothing to support you. So I suggest if you're doing this, if it's for low level and if it's for children, you only have at a maximum a couple of things on one worksheet. The younger the child, the bigger the worksheet. So you just have one task per worksheet. But as it goes up, you can have 2 or 3 tasks on a worksheet when they get to middle school, and for high school, 5 or 6, just the same as an adult. And, when you're doing worksheets, you can write out a piece of text yourself, write out a little mini story or something you've learned perhaps in your training, something like this, and then use that as a basis. Think about the topics that you've learned in your TESOL course related to each level. So we know that every level is learning similar topics. They're learning about themselves, they're learning about the world, the environment, jobs, hospitality, travel, psychology from different aspects, how we think, how people feel, international business. So think about your theme and then, make a worksheet with just a few basic questions, write out a little bit of text, and then you can think about different types of tasks. So you can match up vocabulary to definitions, and you can do broken sentences where there's half a sentence on one side, A to F, and then on the other side, 1 to 6 or 7, I think it is. You've got the other half of the sentence, but it's jumbled. So they have to put them together and get them to do this in pair work. So if you're in a situation where you have no resources, and you have to create them, this is where you start getting creative and you start thinking, right, what sort of tasks can this level handle? So if they're very early level students, they're going to be very basic things like match word, unjumble word, or unscramble, those sorts of things, match picture to text, flashcards. If they are older, then they're going to be able to unscramble sentences, fill in the gaps, do a lot more. And then when they get to older adult students, then they're able to look at word banks and put in the correct word into sentences, and that joining sentence halves, actual writing tasks. So you can give them questions for writing tasks. And I'm not talking about they're going to write a whole paragraph, but they might write a sentence, they might write an explanation, they might write a short answer question. So just be aware, if you're overseas particularly and you're volunteering or working in a country that doesn't have a lot of resources and the internet is sketchy at best or non-existent, think about all the types of tasks that you've seen in ESL course books, the types of topics, think about the vocabulary, and think about those language skills of listening, speaking, reading, writing that you can get them to do. So say you're doing a worksheet for intermediate level adults and you have 5 tasks on that worksheet. So you can have an introductory one for number 1 with a little discussion, and then you can do a task for listening, speaking, reading, writing, using vocabulary that is related to that theme of your lesson, and then you can come up with some text. And you can use fiction or non-fiction, facts or, fantasy. It doesn't matter as long as they're getting language practice. So, I wouldn't recommend this for every lesson that you ever taught, and it's certainly good to travel if you're going to be doing something voluntary with some resources, and have hard copy resources. And if you can't print them, at least if you've got a course book with some resources or some worksheets, you can draw them up on the board and students can take them down as they do each task throughout the lesson. There are ways to handle this. In the early days when I was teaching, the internet didn't exist, and my first job ESL teaching, there weren't even any course books for me to use in the classroom. I had to come up with every single thing every day for the 2-hour lessons that I taught for one particular class, and I got really good at it really quickly because of necessity, and I scoured bookstores. I remember making lessons based on readings of The Secret Garden, and I had business business students who loved it. I just did it as a little extra thing. I said to them, you've got your 2-hour business lesson. Would you like to dedicate 30 minutes to a novel so that you could talk about, English literature and classic stories and things like that when you meet people? And they were all keen as mud. They were like, yeah, absolutely. And then I pulled out The Secret Garden. They were a little bit perturbed, but they got so into it. They would beg me, just one more page, please. You can't leave the lesson now. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, but that's the 30 minutes. We've got other things to cover in the lesson and we've got to go over your homework. But yeah, they would love it. So travel with a novel, travel with a couple of good magazines if you are going overseas, that you can use text to make these worksheets on the fly, even if they're worksheets that are up on the board, or take photos of a whole lot of different things and have them in your camera so that you can take them with you to use. But as I mentioned in the beginning of this podcast, be prepared to make things on the fly as well, and just use your imagination, use your life skills, use what you know, and your training according to the levels and the types of themes, and you'll be fine.